What can happen is you can be sued for an unlawful eviction and you can be subject to a lot of damages. What do you do if your tenant changes the locks on you? Landlords in Ohio, you are entitled by law to have reasonable access to your premises. And that means that you are entitled to have a set of keys or key codes to the property that you're renting to the tenant. If the tenant has changed the locks on you and you have good communication with them still, you need to let them know that that's not appropriate and you need to change the locks back. And you can bill them for this service. If you don't have good communication with the tenant, things might get a little bit more tricky. You are still entitled to get the locks changed so that you have access to the property. But the method that you do so is obviously going to be a little bit more contentious, and you're going to have to take some steps to make sure that you do it legally. The correct way to process this is, first of all, let the tenant know that you're going to be arriving to change the locks. You need to give them a 24-hour notice, at least a 24-hour notice. And the way you do that is in writing, posted directly to their door. At least 24 hours before you're going to go and arrive to change the locks, you need to post that notice on the door stating your reason for doing so, which is to change the locks, and at least 24 hours before that time and date. It doesn't have to be exactly 24 hours, but it has to be at least 24 hours. Once that notice is posted, you need to wait for the time and date. If you anticipate that the tenant won't let you into the property, then you're going to need to make sure that you have a locksmith on call ready to show up so that they can help you change the locks or gain entry to change the locks. The locksmith may request information from you to make sure that you have the proper authority. So you might need to show ownership information, such as information from the county auditor's website, or perhaps even a deed, along with a lease agreement that might also satisfy the locksmith in order to break into the locks so that they can change them. Once the locks are changed, then what you need to do is you need to give a copy of keys to the tenant. Even if you're in the middle of an eviction process, until the tenant is actually evicted and set out of the property, they're still your tenant and you need to provide them access to the property. If you do not give them a set of keys, then what can happen is you can be sued for an unlawful eviction and you can be subject to a lot of damages. Those damages can include the costs for the tenant to find alternative accommodations during the time that they're locked out. You do not want to be put in this situation. Defending the lawsuit itself is its own punishment, let alone the damages you might be required to pay. So what do you do if the tenant isn't around when you need to change the locks? How do you give them the keys? Well, the way you do that is anticipate this first and bring a notice with you to the property when you're changing the locks. When you have your set of keys and the tenant isn't around to receive their set of keys, post this prepared notice on the door. And this prepared notice is going to state what you had done, which was that you had the locks changed. It's going to give all of your contact information so the tenant can reach you promptly. And it's going to tell the tenant, we had to change the locks under our authority as landlords so that we had lawful access to the premises. We have keys available for you and we will provide them for you promptly upon your request. Please contact us. Now, when the tenant contacts you, you need to make sure that you provide them access to the property quickly. You cannot lock them out for 24 hours or 48 hours or have them sitting out in the cold for 8 hours while you're at work before you come and provide them keys. You need to provide access to the property. This can be a little difficult sometimes. One of the ways that you can handle this difficulty is hide the tenant's set of keys somewhere around the property. Then when the tenant gives you a call, whether it's at 2 a.m. in the middle of a workday or at a time that is inconvenient for you to come over to the property promptly and return to them the keys, what you can do is you can tell them, look under the rock over behind the big tree in the backyard, or look over here, the set of keys are available to you. Now, of course, make sure that the person who's calling you is indeed the rightful tenant and rightfully is entitled to access to the property. But once you've verified that, provide them the keys, and they now have access to the property, and you also have access to the property. Hopefully, they won't go and change the locks on you again. If they do, that may be grounds to start an eviction.